Okay, let's dive into this. Imagine, scrolling through your feed and seeing a headline that just stops you cold. Dozens of kids, teenagers, just vanished from one state in just 1 month. That was the situation back in July 2018, particularly around Iowa. The anxiety was just, you could feel it. And it really pulled national focus onto what seemed like a terrifying mystery.
Yeah, it felt like something was seriously wrong.
And right at the center of it all was Molly Tibbets. She was 20, a University of Iowa student, last seen jogging about 7:30 p.m. July 18th in Brooklyn, Iowa.
Right, I remember that case specifically.
Her case really blew up because, well, there were no leads. Police cleared her boyfriend. Her roommate said, she wouldn't run away. They had planes, dogs, nothing.
Just vanished.
Exactly. And her disappearance sort of accidentally lit up this much bigger, frankly, initially terrifying statistic that started going around.
Okay.
This number, 48 teens and children reportedly missing in Iowa, just in July 2018.
48. Wow.
Yeah. And think about it. Iowa's population is, just over 3 million. So 48 kids in a month. That sounds incredibly scary, right?
Absolutely terrifying. You hear that number and your mind immediately goes to the worst place.
And that's exactly what happened. Public reaction, especially online, it just exploded. Rumors spread like crazy.
Oh, I bet.
We saw tweets talking about a, quote, sex trafficking ring operating off the I-80 in Iowa. People were scared about mass abductions, maybe a pedophile ring kidnapping kids. It really felt like something sinister was happening across the state.
And it's completely understandable why people would fear that. That number, 48, taken out of context, is deeply unsettling. But this is where the data gets, interesting, maybe counterintuitive.
How so?
Because those rumors, while fueled by very real fear, were largely unsubstantiated. And that number, 48, despite the shock value, it turns out it wasn't actually unusual.
Not unusual. How can 48 missing kids in a month not be unusual?
Well, unusual compared to what, right? When you look at historical records, broader trends, that figure is pretty much in line with what Iowa typically sees.
Seriously?
Yeah. Which brings up a really critical question for us, Why are numbers that cause so much panic actually considered, statistically speaking, kind of normal? And what does that tell us?
Okay, that changes things.
Yeah.
Because the gut reaction is, this has to be a crisis, something new and terrible.
Right.
But if it's really nothing unusual, then we absolutely need to zoom out. Look beyond Iowa in that moment. What's the history there? What about other places? What's the real scale?
Exactly. Let's put Iowa in perspective first. You mentioned July 2018. We'll look at the year right before that, 2017.
Okay.
In Iowa, in 2017, a total of 4,311 juveniles were reported missing.
4,000.
In 1 year.
Yep. Break that down. It averages out to about 12 kids reported missing. Okay. Every single day in Iowa.
12 a day. So 48 in 1 month. It sounds high, but it's actually below that daily average when you spread it out, and certainly part of a much larger ongoing number. It wasn't some sudden spike out of nowhere.
Wow. Okay. So Iowa wasn't unique then?
Not at all. Look at the neighbors again in 2017. Nebraska reported 6,523 missing juveniles.
Over 6,000.
And Missouri.
Yeah.
Even higher. 7,117 juveniles reported missing that year.
7,000. These numbers are staggering. It feels like an epidemic when you hear them laid out like that.
They are significant numbers, no question, and cause for concern. But here's the other crucial piece, the part that often gets lost in the initial alarm.
All right.
What happens after the report? Let's take Missouri again. 7,117 reported missing in 2017, right?
Right.
By the end of that year, how many of those cases were still unsolved, still open?
I'm almost afraid to guess. Thousands.
51.
Wait, only 51 out of over 7,000.
Exactly. Now look, 51 is still 51 too many. Each one is a person, a family, potentially devastated. We can't diminish that.
Of course not.
But the data clearly shows a huge number of these cases get solved, often very quickly. It shifts the narrative from mass permanent disappearances to something else.
Okay, so high initial reports, but also a really high resolution rate, at least in that Missouri example. So zooming out even further, what does this look like nationally? How do organizations like NCMEC, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, how do they track this across the whole U.S.? What's the big picture?
Yeah, NCMEC plays a huge role. Nationally, in 2017, they helped law enforcement and families with, get this, More than 27,000 cases of missing children.
27,000.
Across the U.S. Put that in daily terms. That's about 75 cases every day.
75 kids a day. That's hard to even process.
It is. It's a constant reality. But it's really important to remember that big number includes all kinds of cases. Runaways, family abductions, the endangered missing, and yes, the very rare stranger abductions that people often fear most.
Okay, so these national numbers definitely put the state figures in context, which leads us right back to that central question, doesn't it? If we have these consistently high numbers, Iowa, nationally, but most cases get resolved quickly, what is actually happening in the majority of these cases? Because public perception, fueled by maybe media or social media, often jumps to the most sinister explanation.
Right, the abduction fear.
Yeah. But the data seems to be pointing somewhere else.
It really does. And the answer, while maybe less sensational than, kidnapping rings, is incredibly important and, frankly, quite sobering.
Okay, what is it?
The primary reason. The vast majority of missing children or teens, they're believed to have run away.
Runaways.
Yes. NCMEC's own breakdown is stark. More than 9 out of 10 cases they assisted with were classified as runaways.
9 out of 10. Wow.
That's the critical piece that often gets missed in the panic.
That's a huge percentage.
It is. But within that statistic, there's another layer that's honestly heartbreaking and demands attention. Vulnerability. NCMEC data suggests that 1 in 7 of those runaways, 1 in 7, were likely victims of sex trafficking.
Oh, my God. While they were missing.
Likely, yes. They run away, they're vulnerable on the streets, and traffickers prey on that. It's a deeply disturbing reality linked to the runaway issue.
That's horrifying.
And there's more. Another often overlooked detail. 88% of those runaways NCMEC dealt with, 88% were already in the care of social services when they went missing.
In the system already.
Yes, which points to, really significant systemic issues. These aren't just kids having a bad day and leaving home. Often they're youth already facing immense challenges, already identified as being at risk, and perhaps not getting the support they need before they run. It paints a picture of extreme vulnerability.
That is incredibly revealing. So the alarm about missing kids is valid, but the why is so often tied to these deeper issues, vulnerabilities, maybe gaps in support systems.
Precisely. It reframes the whole conversation.
And you mentioned the high resolution rate, especially for runaways.
Yeah.
How quickly do some of these cases actually get resolved? Can you give an example?
Absolutely. And you see it happen quickly, which helps explain why the long-term unsolved numbers are lower. Let's go back to Iowa, July 2018. There was a specific Department of Public Safety list of missing persons from July 27th.
Okay.
It initially had 37 names on it, but just 3 days later, 13 of those names were already off the list.
13 gone in 3 days.
Meaning those cases were resolved, found, closed. So while that's just one snapshot, it shows the churn. Cases open, cases close, often very fast. It reinforces that Missouri data point, a huge number will likely be solved, mainly because most are runaways who are located.
Right. So wrapping this up then.
Yeah.
For you listening, what's the big takeaway here? That initial number, 48 missing in Iowa in July 2018. It is tragic. It is terrifying when you first hear it.
Of course.
But the data shows it wasn't really out of the ordinary compared to history or other places. And critically, most cases do get resolved often quickly. But, and this is a huge but, the underlying reasons, especially the sheer number of runaways and how incredibly vulnerable they are, particularly to things like sex trafficking, that remains a massive, critical issue that needs our focus. It's way more complex than the scary headlines suggest.
Absolutely. It's not about downplaying the fear, but directing the concern accurately.
So the main thing for you, our listener, to perhaps take away is this: that initial shock from big numbers. It often hides a more complicated and, sadly, sometimes a more persistent reality. Yes, many cases are resolved fast, thank goodness.
Right.
But the constant flow of runaways, the vulnerabilities that make them run, their risk of exploitation, that demands our continued attention, our empathy, and a much deeper understanding than just reacting to the scary numbers. It's about seeing the real problem beneath the surface.
And maybe connecting this to the bigger picture. Here's a final thought, something maybe a bit provocative to leave you with. What does it actually mean for us as a society when numbers like these, dozens, hundreds, thousands of missing kids, mostly runaways, become statistically categorized as nothing unusual? Does it point to something about our support systems? about the silent struggles young people face that make them vanish from view. It really pushes us to look beyond the statistics and ask some hard questions about how we care for vulnerable youth.
That's a really powerful thought, a sobering one,
Yeah.
and definitely encourages looking deeper than just the initial headlines. Thank you for walking us through that data. It's really clarified a lot.
Glad we could unpack it.
We really hope this deep dive gave you a clearer, maybe more nuanced view of what is undoubtedly a very tough subject. We always encourage you to engage with the show, share your thoughts. It's a compelling topic for sure. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.